talking about a movie that is particularly ballsy and I think you'll find quite shocking, but maybe not for the reasons you think. We are talking about the movie Curse of the Witch's Doll, also known as The Conjuring, The Witch's Doll, and simply The Witch's Doll. This is a low-budget British movie that's going to be released in the States, I believe, by High Octane in February 2018, and is by first-time feature writer-director Lawrence Fowler. So the story's actually set, I believe, in a kind of World War II kind of era, and so it's a period piece, and it focuses initially on this woman called Adeline, who is this kind of woman who is travelling with her young daughter, and she kind of ends up in this large kind of estate, this large stately manor, where she ends up kind of staying. Well, but within this house there seems to be this strange looking doll that may well host the spirits of a long dead witch that obviously causes havoc to her and her daughter. Her daughter kind of goes missing, and obviously the mystery starts anew. So we'll kind of loop back in the plot again. So what works and what doesn't work with Curse of the Witch's Doll. So let's get a couple of things out of the way. It's a lower budget movie, so obviously, you know, production values and stuff like that, you have to kind of take it into account. First time director, first time feature writer, and I've got to say, this movie really does have it goes in some unexpected paths. It will basically really kind of subvert your expectations, but not necessarily in a good way. So allow me to explain without kind of trying to give away anything really here. So the setup of the movie is somewhat, fairly obvious, fairly sort of simple when we initially start. So I've mentioned the kind of the plot synopsis there. About halfway through this film, the plot then veers into a completely different direction, with actually kind of like characters that have kind of been in the background for the most part. The kind of the first half of the movie coming to the foreground and really kind of being the focus, and then it has the balls to do it again towards the end. So this movie actually really kind of like changes course 3 times throughout this movie. It almost feels like an anthology, but it's really just kind of a continuing story, but it really has ultimately 3 sort of separate storylines that are tangentially kind of connected. So it's bizarre. So if you're expecting just a kind of killer doll story a la kind of Chucky, you're not going to get it. It's kind of, there's an element of that obviously, but it's an odd choice because it doesn't really set up for that. It just kind of happens. So that's the first thing. It's a kind of it's a ballsy move that I think is both original and kind of daring by the filmmakers, but also I feel it will be frustrating for maybe the casual viewers who are expecting one thing and end up kind of getting another. So I don't know if it particularly works. When it initially happened, I kind of quite liked the idea. I thought, well, that's actually kind of quite clever. But I thought it was going to kind of revert back to the kind of the original story, but it really doesn't. So I'm a bit of a unsure about what I think about it, if I'm completely honest. So without trying to go into the spoilers, let's talk about what kind of doesn't work and works. The scenes where we actually have the doll. Let's talk about the doll first of all. I mean, this doll looks kind of quite creepy, as you can probably see from the kind of the cover art here. But I think, to be honest with you, they've made it a little bit too overtly kind of creepy. I mean, no one is going to think that's like some kind of normal doll. They just happen across it. It clearly looks like some freakish design. I think it would have been better to maybe have the doll be a little bit more subtle and maybe not quite as overtly horrific that it is. I mean, it looks like a kind of living dead doll, and it's obviously kind of set in a period piece, so you'd be suitably kind of think, no, that's going in the bin straight away. So that's the first thing. The other thing I would say with the doll is it doesn't feature as heavily as I was expecting. The doll is in it and it's kind of peppered throughout the movie, but really other things kind of crop up throughout the process of this film. And so if you're watching this film again, thinking it's going to be a kind of like an Annabelle situation or a kind of a Chucky situation, there are elements, like I've said, but it's not the focus, at least of a good portions of this film. However, when we do see the kind of doll in action, I've got to say I kind of liked it. It maybe looks a little bit cheesy, like I've said, but I kind of like the way they've actually used kind of like CG effects to maybe give the doll somewhat of an expression sometimes. So you're going to see the face kind of move, which I kind of liked, I've got to say. I don't feel that will be for everyone, but I kind of liked it. I thought it looked quite good when it kind of turns its head and stuff like that, and you'll sit up. I thought that worked quite well. So when we do see the doll on screen, and it's kind of doing stuff, it looks suitably freaky. And, you know, I think you can get away with using CGI on kind of things that are meant to be like dolls, because it obviously looks fake to begin with. It doesn't look like flesh. So it kind of works in that respect. But there are a couple of instances, maybe where the effects aren't quite as good, shall we say. But nonetheless, I felt for the effects, for the budget as well, kind of worked for the most part. What I also liked as well was the sets here. So this all takes place in this large, kind of massive, like Gothic looking building. And I've got to say here whether the film and location really adds to that kind of that classic literature feel, and that kind of like almost like those kind of Christmas ghost stories that you're going to watch, you know, with kind of the period piece and the kind of like the old English spooky countryside. That gives it a great kind of like classic ambience to it. So I thought that worked kind of really well. And we essentially have 3 acts in this movie with different kind of storylines, and they all offer something maybe a little bit different to the other ones. And I quite like the fact that it does take a somewhat of an original way of telling it, and it kind of is an anthology film for the if you can really, it really is. There's no kind of getting away from it. But I think it's not advertised like that. It doesn't feel like it's going to be. But it kind of is less of an anthology film. It does have a kind of a through thread. Anyway, and then they all offer something a little bit different. I mean, some aspects work better than others in certain things. What doesn't work to me in a lot of this film is some of the acting. It's some odd choices by the actors. What they kind of do is they really have long. They kind of have these like when they're saying their lines. And this isn't everyone, but it's a few people. They really kind of stretch out the way the way they're saying. So we kind of have this line delivery that sounds really weird, kind of like that. So and then we have long pauses between kind of like the replies and stuff like that, and this really kind of like long, elongated kind of the way that they're pronouncing the words. So it's a really odd choice in regards to some of the acting here. And it's not just with one character either. I mean, if it's one person spot that, you can fair enough, but it isn't. It's more than one. Obviously, this is a low-budget film, first-time director, so I'm assuming some of these actors haven't had a huge amount of experience as well. Yeah, so you know, the acting's kind of a little bit hit and miss if we're being completely honest here. The actual movie takes place in different kind of time zones as well, which I thought was kind of quite neat, as it adds it to a little bit of flavour. But ultimately, there's a lot of talking in this film. There's a lot of conversations where we just have 2 people sitting in a room having a conversation with each other. And I don't feel the characterisation isn't... And because we're flipping between these storylines, these 3 storylines, the characterisation is a little bit lacking in some of the kind of the people that we're talking. So ultimately, these conversations of 2 people talking in a room become a little bit dull. So it's a kind of an odd film, if I'm honest. It kind of feels very unique in a weird way. But it does have a gothic creepy charm. The doll scenes are really fun. There's some horrible makeup in regards to some other kind of antagonists that will pop up. And it looks really horrible. I wish they would have just cast someone who looks a bit freaky rather than kind of doing really crap job on makeup and obviously dyed grey hair. I won't say what, but it just looks rubbish. But I feel the film is very uneven. I don't feel people will be satisfied watching this because I don't feel it delivers on maybe what they were expecting. I mean, maybe it should be kind of more of an anthology and really just wear its anthology on its sleeve and be a bit more overt with that rather than trying to make it seem like it's all one story. I give it a 5 out of 10 because I do feel it has some elements in it, and I do like it when people take risks. I do like it when people maybe kind of like do things that are a little bit against the grain and kind of have a spin of originality in the movie. So I do have to give it some props for that, but I feel ultimately a lot of these kind of plot points end up being a little bit over kind of like melodramatic to a certain degree, somewhat boring, and I feel the kind of changing of the plots is a mixed bag in regards to how the movie progresses. So it's a 5 out of 10 for me. Are you going to watch this movie or have you seen it? Please leave me comments, let me know what you think, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.